So Tracy, why would you even have to put any caulking on this type of wall?
Debbie, this type of wall is known as a milled log. This configuration is what's called a Swedish cope, which has a rounded bottom on each of the logs and they fit over top of the next. They're frequently sold as a package and oftentimes referred to as a chinkless style of home. We have found, however, in many cases that due to the nature of logs to settle, to twist, to move around a little bit, that very frequently these need to be sealed up, either caulked or chinked, in order to keep air from flowing through and to make the house weather tight. They present different problems when it comes to preparing and putting backer rod in and getting them set to chink and seal. So I've got a couple of different styles of backer rod that we can take a look at and see what's going to work. There's a lot of different log configurations and each one's a little bit unique, so on every application you're going to have to take a look at it. It's very critical though that you don't skip the step of putting the backer rod in.
Why is that?
If I were just to caulk a line along here, which would be very easy to do, frequently if there's any movement at all, you're going to get a split.
Oh.
Because the movement's going to be focused in one tiny little spot and there will be no backer rod for the chink to stretch over.
I see. So it breaks free from that and then it
Yes.
moves with the logs.
Even with a very
Okay.
small piece of backer rod in there with the log builder or the log jam over top of that, it will absorb a lot more movement because it can stretch over the backer rod.
So even though it takes a little more labor, you're really saving on the other end because you don't have to come back and do repair.
It's the only correct way to do it and the only way you can do it that it's really going to hold up and last long. So these are the two. Ideally on this type of a log, you're going to want to keep your caulking or your sealant joint as narrow as possible, just for the aesthetics aspect of it.
Because the logs are pretty small.
The logs are small. If we did a 1.5 or 2 inch wide chinking joint in here, there'd be very little log that showed through. So we need to keep it kind of small. The drawback to that is the smaller you keep your joint, the more chance that there will be of separations and splitting.
More stress on that caulk line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the wider the line, the more movement the joint can take. So we're going to try to strike a happy medium and go with a line that'll be about 3/4 to 1 inch wide in here. In order to do that, we do need to put the backer rod in. I've started on these top couple of logs to stick the backer in here, but I wanted to show that really the only two options would be to go with the smallest grade of the trapezoidal type backer rod. And if we hold that up in here, this is a 3/4 inch wide backer rod. By the time we add our chinking material or caulking material to the outside of this, we're going to have a pretty wide line. Also, the nature of these logs, it really doesn't fit in there properly. There'll either be a big gap on the bottom or on the top. So this type of backer rod won't work in
For that application. Okay.
We could go with the open cell type. This is the smallest that's made there, and that would stay in the joint, but we'd also have a very wide joint. And if you want to minimize the size of the joint, we would have to go to the smaller closed cell type.
Okay.
Seems to be the only type that works well. This is very easy to apply. I'll usually take the staple gun right along with me. I'll start at one end of the wall. Start it off with a staple in it. Staple every 18 inches to 2 feet is adequate. As you can see, this goes along pretty quickly, and you can stick this style of backer rod in real fast.
Tracy, am I correct in assuming that the way that we prepare this wall for caulking is just the same as the chink style?
Yes, this wall had been cob blasted.
Okay.
It had a little hand sanding done to it to clean it up the rest of the way, and it's had 2 coats of high Sierra stain applied.
Now, what if you didn't want the caulking to be obvious? I assume you wouldn't want it to be obvious on this style of home. Can you put the caulking in first and then stain over top of it?
You can. That can be done. We typically like to do it afterwards still. There's, as you noticed when we did the chinking, sometimes the water that runs down onto the logs if that goes onto the bare wood, sometimes you can see that through
the stain.
So we usually recommend to do the staining first and then put the caulking or chinking on afterwards.
And then if they didn't want it to show, would they come back then with a little bit of their stain and just put it over top of those joints?
Also, there's a number of different colors of the caulking, so you can usually get a caulking that's real close in color to the color of the stain.
Okay.
Well, Debbie, we're ready to start putting the log builder caulk on this wall. Can you hold the gun here for me a minute, please? And I'll get ready to load this up. Again, we're going to use the follow plate, which goes just down.
Need this nozzle section off of here?
Yes. All right. Now remember, when you load this, you have to lock this lever back.
Right.
You're going to push down on the tube while you pull up on the plunger. Nice and full. Okay, we're going to use this orange cone type style of tip. As you notice, right now there's no hole in the end of it. One of the nice things about this type of a tip is that you trim it off at the level that you want. When I look at what we've got here to fill, ideally I'm going to want about a 3/4 to almost an inch wide joint. So I will come back with my knife and trim this off.
Were you trimming it at less than that?
No, I'm trimming it just about at the width that I'm going to want the finished joint to be. If we were doing a really small joint, I just cut the very tip of that off and it works real well. So now you can see I've got a hole in the end of there that's going to be about 3/4 of an inch or so, which is real close to what I want the finished joint to be. When you start to apply, you have to make sure that you unlock this little latch or else it won't squeeze through. So it's just like using a regular caulking type of gun. And it's similar principle to using the snorkeler, is it's really important to try to lay this bead in there as evenly as you can. That will mean less tooling. Now some people may opt to go for even a narrower bead than this, which could be done, but the narrower the bead, the more you risk having too much movement, which would stress out and tear away the edges. Typically when I stop, I'll try to pull the plunger back just a little bit. This will keep it from oozing out the end and making a mess.
It's a hot day, so
it is a hot day.
Are you only going to do one?
I'm only going to do one, and I'm going to have to even work fairly quick to get this whole unit done.
Does this skin and cure faster than
it does
chinking?
Skin and cure a little bit faster than the chinking does. You can use the foam brush method, but I'm going to use the small trowel to begin with. To make sure I get these edges set. Able to get the top and the bottom edges pretty well set up against the wood. This is drying out pretty quick on me, so I'm going to move along a little quicker and go to the foam brush for the cleanup and the final tooling effect.
So you're going to have to really pick your day to do this.
Ideally, you should do it on a day that's not super hot and doesn't have a lot of wind. I can finish off these edges usually fairly nicely. Now you'll notice a slightly different appearance with the log builder caulk. It's smooth, it doesn't have any of the aggregate or the grit in it, so it's a little smoother look. Where the caulking compound's kind of designed to resemble the old mortar, which had sand in it. Brush gets dirty, it goes into the bucket, Get a clean brush out of your belt. Now this could be done with caulking compound, with a log jam as well. We're just using the log builder here. It's a different look, and it's what some people opt to use on these narrower joints. And just double checking, making sure the top and bottom edges are sealed properly. And the final thing, just as when we were chinking, will be to go back over with the rag and just clean up the edges.
Now, on a day like today, and you're a novice, how much should you do? 2 feet at a time?
Start off with just a couple of feet and try to continue, just work quickly along that line. Sometimes it's hard when it's been freshly applied to do a splice joint in the middle of a line and make the edges look real nice and clean, or where they lap. But yes, I'd start on a much smaller line than this and just practice. It's going to take a little bit of practice to be able to get to put it on and have a nice, neat look. And that's all there is to that line.